Well, joining me live from Goulburn now is the Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor. Angus Taylor, thanks for your time. Bit of news there in that Jim Chalmers interview. We spoke about his changes to the RBA board. He's creating these two boards. He's indicating an announcement in the next couple of days. He said he spoke to you Friday. Are you happy he'll make non-political appointments? Has he taken up any of your suggestions on appointments?
Well, Andrew, just before I get into this, I want to pay tribute to Kevin Andrews, as you know, passed away in the last day or so. He was
Angus
a great
Taylor,
colleague and a great friend.
Angus Taylor, I should point out. Yep. Sorry, I'll let you keep going, but I just wanted to point out I hadn't forgotten about Kevin Andrews, and I was going to ask you about him, but go for it now, please. Yeah.
Well, I thought I'd just say this up front. He was a wonderful, calm, wise colleague who I came to respect over time enormously. He was also a great friend. I spent thousands of kilometres of roads on a bike with him in Polypedal. He was a very keen cyclist, indeed wrote a book on the history of Italian cycling. And I got to know him then as a great friend, a wise head. And I also got to know his wonderful wife, Margie, through Polypedal, who is just an outstanding human being. And my best wishes go to Margie and the family. To your question, Andrew, look, it's disappointing that every time I have a conversation with the Treasurer, he telegraphs it. But our position on the Reserve Bank Board has been clear all along. We want to see the existing board transition to the new board. It's simple. We need stability right now in our Reserve Bank Board. We need a government that does what's necessary to get interest rates down. They're coming down in countries all over the world, not in Australia. We need a government focused on getting inflation down to make the Reserve Bank's job easier, and we need stability in the Reserve Bank Board. So there's no secret on our position on that. It's been a consistent position all the way along. I've conveyed that publicly. I've conveyed that to the Treasurer, and I will continue to. That is our position, and it's disappointing. We saw the first, the early board appointments, indeed immediately after the review was released, where there was no consultation. The government just went and did it. They didn't follow the process. They didn't follow what was recommended in the review. We've made a very clear suggestion about what should be happening here, and the government is clearly rejecting that.
Right. So have you suggested names they've rejected? Is he not going to do what you're saying, which I understand? The existing board is the governance board.
Yes, we
He's not
have.
putting those people on the rate-setting board, right? Is that what you're saying?
Well, look, what I'm saying is we have suggested names. The existing board, that's who should go.
And he said that's not happening.
New board.
And he said that's not happening.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Well, it appears so. It's very clear. He's said that on multiple occasions.
Is there anyone that you believe could be classed as a so-called political appointment that he's talking about? Someone with some sort of Labor Party connection?
Well, I think anything other than taking the existing board and transitioning it to the new board is, I would say, political. It's a sack and stack strategy, as I've said all the way along. That's been the politics of this issue all the way along. We've said we'd work with the Labor Party, but we don't support sack and stack. They decided they wanted to stand at a drafting gate and decide who went to which board. We don't agree with that. We've been clear about that all along. Our position won't change, Andrew.
What do you think is motivating this? Do you believe that if Jim Chalmers puts different people on this so-called rate-setting board, that the government is more likely to get a rate cut early next year from the RBA? When do the appointments begin, for example?
Well, what you're suggesting is that the Treasurer might be attempting to politicise the Reserve Bank Board and to throw away the independence that's been in place, strongly in place since Peter Costello in the 1990s. That's a question you should ask of the Treasurer. How fear has been all along that that's where this might end up. But they're questions for the Treasurer, I should say. What we need right now, though, most of all, is a government that is making it easier for the Reserve Bank to get interest rates down, to get inflation down. We haven't seen that. I mean, with MyEFO coming up, Chris Richardson and other independent economists have told us we're going to see the budget falling off a cliff, just as we've seen the economy falling off a cliff, 7 consecutive quarters of household recession, unprecedented in this country. We're seeing spending growing fast at a rapid rate. And Chris Richardson tells us that we're going to have $220 billion of headline deficits over the next 4 years. This is a disastrous budget situation, which reflects the government taking us on a pathway to economic ruin.
And it may not be a great budget situation, but you've finally released your nuclear policy costings and seen them heavily contested. And they involve, as the Treasurer just said, off-budget spending. They'll involve borrowing or cutting, probably borrowing. Is this the best way forward to Australia? And why wasn't there anything in there on cutting Australians' power bills?
Well, a 44% reduction in electricity costs is the pathway to a stronger economy, lower electricity bills and a better outcome for Australians. I think that's pretty clear. 44% is a big number, Andrew, and that's why we're doing this, including a portion of clean baseload nuclear power in the system brings down the overall costs of the system, which puts you in a position where our manufacturers, data centres, Australian households, small businesses can pay less for electricity over the many decades to come.
Angus Taylor,
and at the same time,
that your estimates, which create that 44%, involves a massive shrinking of what the economy is going to be. What do you say to that?
Oh, well, this is, the only people who know how to shrink this economy is the Labor Party, and they're doing an extremely good job of it right now. 7 consecutive quarters of GDP per capita going backwards. It's completely unprecedented, Andrew. Household budgets are in disarray. They're in ruin. We've never seen the hit to household disposable incomes, the standard of living of Australian households, like we've seen since Labor came to power. Not at any time in the past. Not the recession we had to have under Paul Keating. Not the Gough Whitlam economic disaster. This is worse than all of those situations. And so I won't take lectures on the economy from the Labor Party. But I'll tell you what, one of the ways we know you strengthen the economy is to ensure that the electricity costs in the economy are lower than they otherwise would have been. And that's what this plan does. It's a broad range of technologies in the plan. It's a balance. The one person who isn't balanced on energy is Chris Bowen and his mates. The vested interests are out there squawking away at the moment, as you'd expect them to. The agents of foreign investors in this industry that we see working with Chris Bowen. But he's not interested, it seems, in getting electricity bills down. We've seen that. He promised a $275 reduction, Andrew, and we are nowhere near that. He's got 16 days, by the way. He's got 16 days for the deadline on that, but I think we can all be pretty confident we're not going to see that.
But what you're talking about here, Angus Taylor, if we take the nuclear aspect out of it, is a massive federal government interference or involvement in the energy market. You're talking about up to 38% federal government-owned nuclear plants. We're talking about a capital cost of $140 billion by my calculations. 120, your guys say. It'll probably be more. Let's face it. I mean, you're a former energy minister. Doesn't this distort or stop private sector investment if you put this much federal government investment into an energy market?
Well, a couple of things I'd say about all of that, and they're the assertions that come from those squawking vested interests that I talked about a moment ago, Andrew. The first point I would make about this is the best way to ensure the private sector is strong in this country is to have lower costs of electricity. We're seeing manufacturing going backwards in this country. We're seeing a record rate of insolvencies in businesses across this country. And we know one important contributor to that is electricity bills. If we want to ensure we have a strong private sector, you've got to have low electricity costs. The second point I'd make is that historically, big baseload generators have been driven by government investment. They've got to get a return. That is what's built into the model, and they should get a return. They must get a return. But that's the history of big baseload generators, not just in Australia, but around the world. The key here is to have lower costs of electricity, and that is the goal here, 44% reduction. And I tell you what, something about Labor's plan that they've never been honest about, it is being completely underwritten by government. entirely underwritten by government. How much of that we end up paying for in the budget, there's no transparency whatsoever from Chris Bowen on this, but it is being underwritten by governments, indeed right to the point where we're seeing the Victorian and New South Wales government doing backroom deals with coal-fired generators to keep them open because that's necessary, they've discovered belatedly, in order to get sensible outcomes. So, you know, this is the kind of hypocrisy we see from Labor. A Labor Party that is taking us down the path of 4 consecutive massive deficits we see coming up, as Chris Richardson tells us, $220 billion in 4 years in the headline cash balance in the red, Andrew. That's the issue we've got to deal with right now.
The coal-fired power station staying open for longer. Briefly, who funds that? Is that the federal government under you or the state governments, or how's that going to happen?
Well, that is all being costed in the costings that have been put out.
Okay, fair enough.
It includes coal remaining open until there is appropriate replacement, and that will be a mix of technologies.
Could it be federal funds that allow? If I had the New South Wales government saying we're not going to do that. It's all entirely costed. Right now, the Victorian and New South Wales governments are covering that. We'll see. Labor hasn't been transparent about the pathway they're pursuing on this right now. They've put out some changes which are very vague and in principle. All right, Angus Taylor, I'm nearly out of time.
We'll be watching that very closely.
Sorry, I'm nearly out of time. I just want to get a couple of things in. The suggestion you could have a plant up and running by 2036, isn't that a bit ambitious? Mm-hmm. You've got to put a regulatory system in, etc.
No, look. Yeah, I know. And, you know, it's true that under Labor, regulatory systems are sclerotic and they stop everything from happening. Our approach to a regulatory system is to get things moving, Andrew. It's a very different approach. It's a Liberal Party approach, which says don't clog up the system with more unnecessary regulation. Get your regulation right, fit for purpose, and get things done quickly. I mean, we're seeing a Labor Party that regulates our resources industry out of existence. Getting an approval through in the resources sector right now is impossible. Getting approvals through for housing is proving to be impossible. There's a different approach to regulation, which is fit for purpose to deliver the outcomes we need, but don't clog up the private sector, don't clog up investment, don't clog up the investments that need to be made by governments as well. But that's exactly what's happening under the Labor Party.
I just want to circle back on this RBA board stuff with some developing news really on the program this morning. Now, I'm told not one person is getting sacked. So maybe they won't be on the rate setting board, but no one's leaving the RBA. And I should clarify to our viewers, it's from the 1st of March this begins. So do you accept that? No one's going? Is there any particular person that's giving you a red flag when the government's giving you a name?
Clearly, Andrew, you're getting lots of texts through from the Treasurer or the Treasurer's office as he kind of carries on as he does. Let's be clear here. We said we wanted the current board transitioned over. We wanted stability in the board. We've seen someone standing at the drafting gate deciding which current board members they want on the governance board, which current board members they want on the monetary policy setting board. We said that's unacceptable. We wanted to see the existing board carried over. We know how Labor deals with appointments. They get their own way and they find ways of doing that, and that's clearly what they've done here. You know, I've been clear about this right from the start. There's been absolutely no ambiguity in our position. It's unfortunate that the Treasurer likes to telegraph when he's having private conversations with me. I don't do that. He's decided to do that. But what I will say is our position is unambiguously clear on this. It has been all along and it won't be changing.
Shadow Treasurer Angus Taylor, thanks so much for your time.
Good on you, Andrew. Good to be with you.